Hey, it's Jeff Zito, and thanks for checking out another episode of the Celebrity Jobber Podcast. Whether you listen on Apple or Spotify, iHeart, we're on them all. So please subscribe. Would love a 5-star rating and leave a review. You can check out all past episodes online on celebrityjobber.com. You can also follow on youtube.com/the@celebrityjobber or on IG, celebrity_jobber_podcast. So what would these celebrities have turned into if not for their big break? Maybe they would have just turned into a regular, everyday, 9-to-5 working stiff like you and I. This is a Celebrity Jobber Rewind, as this has become one of the top podcasts on the Apple Podcast Music Interviews chart. I wanted to give everybody an opportunity to check out an older episode, which was episode number 2. The legendary Warren Haynes from Gov't, Mule, and the Allman Brothers Band. You know, with Dickie Betts passing away within the last year or so, I thought it was important to probably replay this interview again for everyone who missed it early on, because honestly, there wasn't that many people listening to this podcast very early on. So I wanted to bring it back to life, so to speak. I mean, Warren Haynes is not only a legendary guitar player, but he's a really interesting guy. He's got a story, just like everybody else. And we're going to hear about his big break. We're going to hear a lot about Dickie, the late, great Greg Allman, how he got into Gov't, Mule, what his first job was. By the way, he wasn't very fond of his first and only job, which you're going to hear about shortly on Celebrity Jobber Rewind. From all the way back on October 7th of 2022, the legendary Warren Haynes is my guest on Celebrity Jobber.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Check out all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
So let me know a little bit about yourself, Warren. From North Carolina originally, you spent a lot of time there?
Yeah, I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina, and lived there till I was in my early 20s. I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and at that point, you know, a lot of stuff was changing. Things were getting better and better in my career at that time, and of course, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, well, at that time that you're talking about, you hooked up with David Allan Coe, and you were just a kid, weren't you?
I think I was 19 or had just turned 20 when I started playing in his band, and did that for a couple of years, but it was through him that I met Dickie Betts and Greg Allman.
Wow.
Which eventually led, me down the line to me joining the Allman Brothers.
So at 20 years old in Asheville, North Carolina, what were you doing? What were you doing at the time in North Carolina before this all happened?
Playing music, playing in bands that were trying to get away with doing original material and hoping to get a record contract and start making records, and going through that whole process. When I grew up in Asheville, the drinking age was 18 at that time.
Right.
And so the bars were packed with 18, 19, 20-year-olds that a few years later would not be allowed to drink. So the club scene was really big, and there was a band in every club, and most of the bands were playing original material. Of course, that changed. It coincided with disco coming in, which put musicians out of work.
Right.
So when I got the offer to join Coe's band in 1980, I didn't really have any experience playing country music, or not that his music is really straight country, but I didn't know much about his his music and had never played that type of music before, but he said that he wanted a blues rock guitar player to add an edge to his sound. So I was the person he chose. And so I was thrust into this whole other world, but that eventually led to me meeting Dickie Betts and Greg Allman,
right,
and to moving to Nashville.
So when you first hooked up with, how did that meeting come about? You were a 19 or 20-year-old kid in Asheville, North Carolina, and how did this meeting with David Allan Coe and getting his band come about?
His bass player, Mickey Hayes, was from the other end of North Carolina. He was from the more in the Raleigh area, and he was hanging out in Asheville and heard me playing and took my phone number, and it turns out they were looking for a guitar player.
Was this, like, would you consider this, Warren, like your big break? I mean, because you were younger, obviously you went on to do so many other things with so many, great people, so many great artists, musicians. But would you consider this your big break, especially at that age? Well,
it was the first big break that I had, and it led me to what I would consider my biggest break, which was playing with Dickie Betts. When I started playing with Dickie Betts, I played with him for 3 years, and then they asked me to join the Allman Brothers, and so that was. I really feel like it was that sequence of events that allowed everything to kind of take off in my life.
Celebrity Jobber. The Celebrity Jobber podcast with Jeff Zito.
Let me ask you this, Warren. Have you ever thought about if you weren't playing music, if you didn't get that break, what you'd be doing these days? You ever just sit back and think, like, did you have a family business? I mean, have you ever thought about if music wasn't going to take off for you, what your actual occupation might be today?
I never really thought about it much. I think if I didn't pursue music, I would have probably pursued some sort of writing, either writing books or journalism or something, because I was always enamored with that. But I've been doing this since I was 14 and never really looked back. And there was no family business, so to speak, but I had two older brothers that had really great taste in music and still do. And one of my brothers eventually opened a record store, which was the coolest record store within hundreds of miles. And so, the whole music and all that has been kind of part of our family in that way for a long time. But I know it's not like, I would have gone into the family business or something. What
about your first job, Warren? Did you have a first job outside of music when you were younger?
I had a first and only job.
Yeah, what was that?
Working at KFC when I was 15.
How long did that last?
1 month.
Really?
And they figured out that I was working too late as a 15-year-old, and they said, when you turn 16, we have to let you go, but when you turn 16, you can come back to work. And of course, when I turned 16, I was in a band and had no interest in going back to KFC.
Yeah, I would say so, man. I would say so. Did that job, though, did you learn anything from that job that you might keep with you to this day?
How much I hated working at KFC.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So let's get into when your big break happened musically, and you were with David Allan Coe for a few years. You started with him when you were 19 or 20. And then how did you meet Dickie Betts? Dickie Betts, I'm pretty friendly with Dickie. He's down here in Bradenton, Sarasota area, and he's been down here for a long time. How did you come to meet Dickie Betts?
I was in Nashville with Coe recording an album, and that I was a big Allman Brothers fan. And so he sent a limousine by the studio where they were also recording to pick up what would turn out to be Dickie and Greg Allman and Don Johnson, who was hanging out at that time as well.
You talking about Miami Vice, Don Johnson?
Yep. Who Don at that time was writing songs.
Yeah.
And introduced himself as an unemployed actor.
Okay.
And Guy Clark was also with them. And so we all just kind of hung out in the studio late night. And you know, Dickie was very kind to me and very encouraging, and we played some music together. And Greg was very kind as well. It was a beautiful, memorable night for me, but I was super young, you know. But they were very encouraging of my guitar playing as a 20-year-old, you know. So years would pass. Every year or two, Dickie and I would reconnect and sometimes play together. And then somewhere around 1986, I got called to sing backup on a record that he was making at that time. And I think when I walked in the studio, he kind of had this idea of he and I playing some together, and he wasn't happy with the record that they were making. And he called me out of the blue and said, hey, I'd love to get together and do some playing and write some songs. And it was just a wonderful opportunity for me.
And then how long did that last? Because was it on a Dickie Betts Band album?
No, this was a record that he made that never came out.
Okay.
And so he wasn't happy with the direction of it. It was too Nashville, for lack of a better description. And so he said, I scrapped that record. I want to make a rock and roll record.
Okay.
And so he and I started writing some together and wound up making what would be Pattern Disruptive, the Dickie Betts Band Pattern Disruptive, which was in 1988.
Okay.
And then we toured behind that record, and then in 89, out of the blue, I got a call saying they were reforming the Allman Brothers for a 20th anniversary tour and wanted me to join. And, of course, that was an incredible surprise.
Describe the feeling when you got that phone call. You're a big fan of the Allman Brothers, and, of course, you know Greg and Dwayne and Dickie, and you're getting this phone call saying we are reforming, the Allman Brothers, and we want you to join the band. I mean, is there a specific place that you mentally go to when you think about that time of your life?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was such a major opportunity, the biggest opportunity that I had ever experienced. But you have to understand, too, that when I say a big Allman Brothers fan, the Allman Brothers were and are one of my all-time favorite bands. I always tell people that if I had to choose a band that I grew up listening to that I could somehow join, the Allman Brothers would be at the absolute top of that list.
Wow.
So this was monumental, but I didn't expect that they were going to stay together beyond this reunion tour. It was just booked as 1 year. We're going to do this 20th anniversary tour, but it was very successful, and the band sounded amazing, and the chemistry with the original members and the new members was great, and everybody was getting along great. So they said, well, let's do it again next year, and then let's do it again next year. And so that lasted for me for 25 years.
Wow.
Celebrity Jobber. The Celebrity Jobber podcast with Jeff Zito. And
you were a part of that Woodstock 94 performance with the Allman Brothers, weren't you?
Yes, and that was an amazing experience as well.
Yeah, tell me about that. How many, the crowd it had to be one of the largest crowds, if not the largest crowd you ever played in front of.
I think it was 350,000
Wow.
people. I may be wrong, give or take a little bit. But that was an incredible day for a lot of reasons. For one, we were already booked that day and had been booked that day for a long time in Boston at what they used to call Great Woods. I don't know what they call it now. But the Great Woods show was sold out and had been for months. And so when they offered us the Woodstock position, we couldn't cancel our Great Woods show. So we said the only way we could possibly do it is if we went on super early and played at Woodstock and then took a private plane from there to Boston and played a second show, which none of us at that time had ever done, to my knowledge. So we went on, I think, around noon or 12:30 at Woodstock and had a really good set, and then flew to Boston and played for 3 hours.
Wow.
And we were all joking around that the Boston show was going to suck because we were going to be really tired, and it turned out to be fantastic.
Probably the opposite because of the adrenaline and all that.
Yeah, and I think relaxing because the pressure of Woodstock was behind us.
Right.
We could just do what we normally did. The other thing that I remember was that, at that time we had lost Bill Graham and Stevie Ray Vaughan, both due to helicopter crashes. And nobody in the Allman Brothers wanted to take a helicopter to Woodstock. And we kind of made it a deal breaker and said that we're not going to do that. And they said, well, we can't get you in here any other way. And I remember going to sleep on the bus, not knowing if and how we were going to get in.
Wow.
And then I woke up and we were somehow backstage at Woodstock.
Wow.
But yeah, we had kind of refused to do the helicopter thing.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I hear nightmare stories about helicopters, so I don't blame you.
I was definitely in agreement with that.
Tell me a little bit about how Gov't Mule kind of forms. At what timeline does Gov't Mule? I know it was a kind of a side project at one point, and where did they kind of fit into the whole chronology of these events?
Well, I joined the Allman Brothers in '89. In '92, I recorded my first solo record, which came out in '93, which was called Tales of Ordinary Madness. After I had released that record and toured behind it, Alan Woody and I were talking about doing something just for fun. On tour with the Allman Brothers, myself and Alan Woody and Greg Allman shared a tour bus, so we were hanging out all the time. And Woody and I had talked about doing something as a side project, which turned out to be Gov't Mule, but not thinking that it was going to be a real band or that we were going to keep it together year after year after year. We just thought we would go in, make a low-budget, kind of improv-oriented record, do a tour behind it, and then go back to business as usual. Because at that time, the Allman Brothers worked about half the year, so we had the other half of the year to do whatever we wanted to do. But it turned into something beyond that, and the chemistry that myself and Alan Woody and Matt Apps had was very strong. And it coincided with the fact that there was a lot of turmoil in the Allman Brothers at that time. And so we were focusing on all the things, all the positive things that were going on in the Gov't Mule camp, and it just kind of built its own steam and took off.
Wow, and 30 years later, still going strong, huh?
Yeah, hard to believe, yeah.
Unbelievable, man. Tell me a little bit about your time spent with Greg Allman and what kind of guy he was, because I had an opportunity to spend some time with him a long time ago, and he just seemed like a real genuine guy. Tell me about your experience with him and looking up to him. As you told me, if there's anybody that you grew up listening to that you could join their band, that it was them. That was, they were your musical idols, so to speak. Tell us a little bit about your experience with Greg Allman and getting to know him.
Well, Greg and, as I mentioned, Greg and myself and Woody shared a bus, so we were together all the time, and we traveled the world together. And on our bus, there was music being played all the time and a lot of laughter. Greg was a really funny person with a really cool, dry sense of humor, and of course, Alan Woody's one of the funniest people I ever met. And so it was just constant on our bus, Greg and I wrote a lot of music together, and I have really fond memories of all the songs that we wrote together and all the recordings. Greg could be really shy, but the opposite of that came out on stage, but not in a normal frontman sort of way. He sat behind the organ and sang his ass off, and that was the Greg Allman persona. So it was such an amazing experience. Because my joining the Allman Brothers came about through Dickie. Dickie brought me in. But I had, at that time, Dickie and I had written quite a bit of music together, and I had just written a song for what would be Greg's album at that time, Just Before the Bullets Fly. So since I was writing with both camps, or for both camps, so to speak, they were kind enough to embrace me as one of the songwriters and pull me in to the fold that way, and that's something that I don't take for granted at all, because not a lot of bands who had that kind of career would open themselves up that way to someone who was new in the band.
They must have really respected your playing, though.
Well, I think I was there for a reason, and a lot of that reason is because I was such a huge fan and had studied that music so much, but also they wanted me to bring my own personality into the fold, and there was just a nice chemistry that happened with all of us at that time. The original members, coupled with myself and Alan Woody and Johnny Neal, who was playing piano in the band at that time, that chemistry was really special in '89, and kind of led to a great resurgence, which is the right time for that to happen.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito.
From emails to reports and project proposals, it's hard to meet the demands of today's competing priorities without some help. Grammarly is the essential AI communication assistant that boosts your productivity at work so you can get more of what you need done faster. Just a few clicks can tailor your tone and writing so you come across exactly as you intend. Get time back to focus on your high-impact work. Download Grammarly for free at Grammarly.com/podcast.
Celebrity Jobber.
You still keep up with Dickie at all? Is he you talk to him at all? Is he still a wild man?
It's been a while. I saw him a while back at Peach Fest, which is a festival in Pennsylvania that the Allman Brothers started. But we, haven't talked in a bit. Look forward to seeing him soon.
What about David Allan Coe? He's still kicking, isn't he?
I ran into him at Sirius Radio in New York one time. That's been a few years ago as well, but yep, still doing it.
He's still doing it. I just saw him a couple of years ago. Still got it. Still doing it. He looks like he hasn't cut his hair in a while, but he's still doing it, man. Now, is it true that you're married to one of us, Warren? You're married to a DJ? Is that true?
Yeah, my wife, Stephanie Scamardo, is a on-air personality, as they call it these days.
Is that why you're so tolerant with me today?
No, I think whatever tolerance I have or don't have has been with me my whole life.
So she's also your manager, is that correct?
Yes. When we met over 30 years ago, she was just starting in the music business at that time, and of course I was still in my 20s. And she worked as an A&R person for Island Records for quite a while, and then started a management company and a record label called Evil Teen Records. And in the beginning, we had kind of vowed to keep everything separate and not work together, but it was actually Alan Woody's idea years ago to bring her into the fold and make her Gov't Mule's manager.
Wow.
And that's still going.
For all the guys listening out there, would you say, because a lot of us would say, I don't particularly want to work with my wife. I want to work, I want my own time and then go. How is it working with your wife? Is it, it's not really too direct. It's, kind of off to the side, but does it get challenging at any point?
Well, I think anyone, male or female, would know that there's pros and cons to that situation. In the beginning, I think that we both thought that the cons outweighed the pros, but eventually it was the other way around. And so whatever tension comes from working together is made up by all the positives. When Alan Woody asked me, what do you think about Steph being our manager? I remember my response was, well, if you're asking me if I think she'll do a great job, the answer is yes, but it also puts me in a position where I can't fire my manager.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, man. Well, listen, man, you've been really, really cool. I really appreciate it. I remember a few years ago sitting down with Taylor Momsen from The Pretty Reckless at one of these big festivals, and she said, hey, what do you think about our new song? And I said, man, to be honest with you, it sounds like an Allman Brothers song. She goes, well, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Warren Haynes is playing guitar on Back to the River, and it blew me away because it had the sound. You couldn't deny the sound, and it also blew me away because I didn't expect her and that band to, have that type of influence, and how is that working with Taylor and the Pretty Reckless, and how did that come about?
It was really cool. I really enjoyed working on that tune, and it came about by them just reaching out and saying, we kind of envisioned your style of playing on this song. What do you think? And then also, incidentally, they were on tour with Chris Cornell at the time.
Yes, and that was the tour. That's the tour I'm speaking of.
She was with Chris the night before he passed, and so that's a very bittersweet subject in that way. But I really enjoyed that a lot.
It was a real pleasure, Warren. Thanks so much. I look forward to seeing you, meeting you in the future.
Sounds good. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
This guy is just a legend, and just some of the old stories that he told about, getting with the Allman Brothers and, meeting Dickie Betts and, how that all came along is just really, really cool. And as Dickie Betts has, just passed away within the last year, made me kind of want to revisit this episode of Celebrity Jobber because I think it might have gotten lost. It was a really early episode that a lot of people might not have heard. It was episode number 2. Warren says he really liked writing. So if it wasn't writing music, maybe he'd be writing for a magazine. The one thing his first job working at KFC taught him was he didn't want to work at KFC. Didn't like fast food, but who could blame him, right? Very cool guy. Warren Haynes from the Allman Brothers Band and Gov't Mule. A Jobber Rewind was a very early episode, so a lot of people probably missed it. Wanted to give you the opportunity to check it out. As the Celebrity Jobber podcast is one of the top podcasts on the Apple Podcast Music Interviews chart. Please subscribe. Would love a 5-star rating and leave a review. Plus, you can follow youtube.com/the@CelebrityJobber or on IG celebrity_jobber_podcast. Thanks for checking out another episode of the Celebrity Jobber podcast. Until next week, I'm Jeff Zito.